Imagine, if you will, a universe where the most groundbreaking discoveries in science, from Archimedes splashing in his bathtub to finding the Higgs boson, aren't just these separate light bulb moments.
Hmm.
What if they're all connected, like stages of a single hidden process that's been going on all along?
That's a pretty profound thought. Like, maybe everything we think we know about reality is just, well, skimming the surface of something much, much deeper.
Exactly. And that's precisely the kind of deep dive we're embarking on today.
Yeah.
We're looking into a really radical new framework called the Unified Coherence Theory of Everything, or UCTE for short.
And it's not just about adding a few footnotes to physics, is it?
Yeah.
This theory is proposing a fundamental reinterpretation of physics, sure, but also mathematics, even philosophy.
It really asks you to rethink basically everything. Our main source for this journey is Philip Lilien's work, UCTE, Coherence Foundations for Physics, a corrected and extended Eureka compendium.
Yeah, and what Lilien does, which is fascinating, is he goes back through history, over 100 major Eureka moments, those big breakthroughs, and he reevaluates every single one through this completely new lens of coherence. It's quite the undertaking.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to really unpack the core ideas of UCTE. We want to show you how it recategorizes these huge historical discoveries, reveals some of its really startling original insights, and this is a crucial look at the predictions it makes, the ones we could actually test.
Basically give you a shortcut to getting properly informed about a theory that honestly could fundamentally change how we see the universe.
Absolutely. So are you ready? Let's get into it. Where do we start with UCTE? What are the absolute fundamentals?
Okay, so at the very heart of UCTE, there are these foundational pillars. The first one, and it's really the keystone, is coherence itself.
Coherent. What does UCTE mean by that exactly?
Lilien defines it quite specifically as the degree to which a field, system, or process maintains phase-structured order. So think of it like the ultimate organizing principle of reality itself.
Okay, phase-structured order.
Yeah.
Like a synchronized pattern or rhythm.
Exactly. It's not just a feature of things. UCTE says it's the fabric from which everything else emerges. Physical laws, forces, particles, even space-time itself, they all supposedly arise from the structuring, the reduction, and the preservation of this fundamental coherence.
Wow, so it's not about particles being fundamental, but the relationships, the ordered structure between things. That's the real bedrock.
You've got it. It flips the script, the relationships, the order, that comes first. And that leads directly into the second pillar. Hypergravity invariance?
Hypergravity invariance. That sounds significant.
It is, because this actually replaces Lorentz invariance. You know, the idea from Einstein that the laws of physics are the same for everyone moving uniformly. UCTE says that's not the ultimate invariant.
So what is?
Hypergravity invariance is. It's described as the universal background frame. It's the backdrop against which all these coherence gradients, these changes in order, are measured.
A universal frame. Does that mean it's just a static background, like
Oh,
a
no.
stage?
Oh, not at all. That's the key thing. It's not passive. UCTE calls it the generative prime mover. It's actively, continuously projecting this underlying infinite potential, the homolectic coherence field, into the structured forms we see as reality.
Generative prime mover.
Yeah.
So it's constantly creating. It's the engine, not just the stage.
Precisely. It's the source of ongoing creation. Which brings us to the third piece, the meta operator, written as M hat.
MK, the meta operator. What's its job in this picture?
It's what governs how reality actually emerges from potential. It's a dyadic operator, meaning it has two key parts working together.
Two parts.
Yeah. First, there's the symmetry coherence operator, or sigma hat. Its job is basically to amplify or preserve coherence, keep things ordered, stable.
Okay, preserves order. And the second part?
That's the asymmetry resonance operator, R hat. This one does the opposite in a way. It reduces coherence by selecting specific basis states. Think of it like collapsing possibilities into a definite outcome.
Ah, okay. Like making a choice out of many options.
Exactly. And here's the really mind-bending part. UCTE identifies this R hat as the universal observer function.
Universal observer. But does that mean consciousness, like a person looking?
No, and this is critical. UCTE defines observation universally, not anthropically. It says observation is any asymmetry resonance that selects a basis in the coherence manifold. It's a fundamental process woven into the fabric of reality itself, not tied to consciousness.
So the universe is, in a sense, observing itself through these resonances that pick out specific realities.
That's a good way to put it. And this meta-operator, with its two parts, creates a continuous feedback loop. Observation reduces coherence, reality gets reprojected by the hypergravity invariance, and the cycle continues.
That's a dynamic picture. Are there other core ideas?
Two more key axioms. There's the dual seeds axiom. This posits that reality emerges from an irreducible duality. The coherence field, which is like pure, undifferentiated potential, and identity, which represents distinction or separateness.
Potential and distinction.
Yeah.
So reality is fundamentally this interplay.
Yes, a constant dance between the two. And finally, there's the conservation of coherence principle.
Ah, like conservation of energy, but for coherence.
Precisely. It states that in any closed system, the total amount of coherence is conserved. It doesn't just vanish.
So when things seem to fall apart or become disordered, like entropy increasing.
UCTE reinterprets that. What looks like dissipation or increasing disorder is actually just the export of coherence out of the system into its environment. It's not destroyed, it's just redistributed. Entropy, in this view, isn't disorder per se, but coherence residue, the leftover coherence that's no longer accessible or usable within that specific system.
Okay, so those are the pillars. Coherence itself, hypergravity invariance is the engine, the meta-operator doing the observation and selection, the dual seeds of potential and identity, and conservation of coherence. That's quite a foundation.
It is. And armed with these, UCTE doesn't just build something new. It goes back and systematically re-examines over a century of physics breakthroughs. Lilien uses this really neat classification scheme.
Right, you mentioned that, the three categories.
Exactly. Stones, upgrades, and replacements.
Okay, what are stones?
Stones are the ideas that UCTE sees as fundamentally solid, even if it adds a deeper layer of understanding. These are the anchors. Think Archimedes' principle, Newton's calculus, the Compton effect, detecting gravitational waves, Shor's algorithm, Bose-Einstein condensates. These core discoveries hold up.
Got it. Foundational truths. What about upgrades?
Upgrades are concepts that are mostly right, but get a significant reinterpretation through the lens of coherence dynamics. They're given a UCTE makeover, revealing a more fundamental coherence mechanism underneath.
Okay, refining existing ideas. And the last one, replacements.
Replacements. This is where UCTE gets really radical. These are conventional ideas that the theory says are either incorrect or just plain unnecessary. They get completely supplanted by UCTE's own native explanations.
This is where the sparks fly, I imagine. Challenging established physics.
Absolutely. And these aren't minor adjustments. We're talking about overhauling some really central pillars of modern physics.
Okay, let's dive into those. Which major concept gets replaced first?
Well, arguably one of the biggest is the Higgs mechanism. UCTE replaces the Higgs mechanism with hypergravity coherence mass emergence.
Wow, okay. So the standard model view, particles get mass by interacting with the Higgs field that permeates space, confirmed by the 125 GeV boson discovery. UCTE says that's not the whole story, or even the right story.
It says it's not the fundamental story. The historical view, yes, involves the Higgs field, its non-zero vacuum expectation values, spontaneous symmetry breaking. It all fits together beautifully in the standard model, and the formula MF equals YFV S squared T2 links mass to the field.
But UCTE offers a different source for mass entirely.
Completely different source. It argues that rest mass doesn't come from interacting with an external field like the Higgs. Instead, it results from the coupling of a particle's localized field modes directly to that fundamental hypergravity invariant background, combined with the particle's own inherent coherence eigenvalues.
Okay, wait, coherence eigenvalues. So mass is related to a particle's intrinsic structure, its internal order.
Exactly. It's about how the particle's own coherence pattern resonates within the universal hypergravity framework. Mass is an emergent property of that relationship.
So what about the 125 JV particle we found, the Higgs boson? What is it then, according to UCTE?
UCTE reinterprets it. It's real, it's measurable, but it's seen as a sectoral resonance mode within the electroweak coherence field. Think of it like a specific vibration or excitation within that field structure. It's a consequence of the deeper mass-generating mechanism, not the cause itself.
So the particle is real, the mass phenomenon is real, but the explanation, the why, is totally different. How does UCTE formalize that, like conceptually?
Conceptually, it uses a mass functional. Imagine describing a particle's state, its wave function. Its mass emerges from two main things. First, a universal coupling to the hypergravity background, a sort of baseline connection everything has. Second, a sum over its specific coherence eigenmodes. These unique internal coherence signatures define the particle type.
So Different particles have different coherence signatures leading to different masses.
Precisely. And those Yukawa couplings from the Standard Model, UCTE views them as just effective parameters. They describe how strongly these eigenmodes project, rather than being fundamental interaction strength with a Higgs field.
Okay, that's a fundamental shift. Does it lead to predictions? Things we could actually look for that would be different from the Standard Model.
Absolutely, and this is key. These are falsifiable predictions. For instance, UCTE predicts environmental mass shifts.
Meaning a particle's mass could change depending on where it is.
Subtly, yes. In regions with altered vacuum coherence, think inside Casimir cavities, or in extremely strong electromagnetic fields, or even near intense gravitational gradients, UCTE predicts particle rest masses should shift slightly, in ways the Standard Model, with its fixed Higgs coupling, doesn't predict.
Tiny changes, but measurable. That would be huge if detected.
Huge. It also predicts other Higgs-like coherence resonances, not just the 125 GeV one. There could be other resonance modes at different energies, corresponding to different ways the coherent symmetry group can project. New targets for particle colliders.
More resonances. And what about neutrinos? Their mass is still a puzzle.
UCTE offers a unified neutrino mass origin. Their tiny masses arise naturally from this same hypergravity coherence coupling mechanism. No need for a separate, often complicated seesaw mechanism that's usually invoked. It just fits into the general framework.
That tidies things up considerably. Any other predictions related to the Higgs?
Yes, it suggests that if we measure the properties of the 125G boson with extreme precision, its decay patterns, branching ratios, or how it interacts with itself, self-coupling, we should see small, perhaps scale-dependent anomalies, especially in environments with high coherence gradients. Tiny deviations from Standard Model expectations.
Okay, specific testable deviations. That's powerful. What's the next major replacement UCTE proposes? It seems like it tackles cosmology, too.
It does, head on. It replaces inflation theory with the early coherence phase cascade, or ECPC.
Right, inflation. The idea that the very early universe underwent this incredibly rapid exponential expansion driven by an inflating field. It solved problems like the flatness and horizon issues and seeded cosmic structure. A cornerstone of modern cosmology.
A cornerstone UCTE seeks to replace. It argues the universe's early uniformity in structure didn't come from an inflating field driving exponential expansion. Instead, they emerged from this ECPC process.
Early coherence phase cascade, so not one smooth inflation, but steps.
Exactly. In UCTE's big emergence picture, the universe starts as a pure coherence field, this omnilectic state of infinite potential. Then, structure unfolds through a series of staged coherence reductions. Discrete phase transitions occur at specific coherence eigenvalue thresholds. Each step reduces symmetry and brings forth more specific structure.
Like a cascade down a waterfall, but with coherence levels.
That's a great analogy. It replaces the single rapid expansion of inflation and the uniformity we see. UCTE says it arises naturally from the initial globally coherent pre-cascade state, thanks to hypergravity invariance, a deeper causal connection than just smoothing things out.
And the seeds of galaxies, where do they come from if not stretched quantum fluctuations?
They come from quantum coherence eigenmode selection during the cascade. As coherence reduces, specific patterns are naturally selected and amplified, forming the initial density variations.
Conceptually, how does the ECPC describe this unfolding?
It focuses on how the expansion rate changes across these stages. The overall expansion history isn't a simple exponential. It's more like a product of terms, each representing a stage transition. It encodes the specific rates of coherence reduction at each step, giving the universe's expansion a unique, multi-stage signature.
A signature we could potentially detect. What are the observable predictions here? How would we tell ECPC apart from inflation?
The cosmic microwave background, CMB, is key. Both predict a nearly scale invariant spectrum, but ECPC predicts subtle differences. Look for tiny stage imprint features, small oscillatory wiggles in the angular power spectrum, like faint ripples across the CMB map. Also, expect step-like features in how the spectral index changes with scale, rather than the smooth running predicted by simple inflation models.
So higher precision CMB maps might reveal these bumps and steps.
That's the hope. ECPC also predicts unique signatures in the CMB's polarization patterns, the EE and BB modes. And for primordial gravitational waves, instead of a smooth spectrum, UCTE predicts a multi-bump spectrum, a peak corresponding to each major stage in the cascade.
Multiple bumps. That would be a very clear signal.
Very clear. Plus, maybe slight deviations from perfect Gaussianity in the CMB fluctuations correlated with the number of stages, and potentially even coherence relics showing up in large-scale structure as faint, shell-like patterns in how galaxies are distributed.
This really does weave cosmology and fundamental coherence together. What's the third big replacement? It must be dark matter, right? That's another huge puzzle.
You guessed it. UCTE tackles the evidence for dark matter, reinterpreting it as coherence mass condensates.
Okay, so the standard picture. Galaxy rotation curves, gravitational lensing, large-scale structure formation, all point to unseen mass, usually explained by cold dark matter, CDM particles like WIMPs or axions. What does UCTE say it is instead?
It says the missing mass isn't exotic particles, it's these coherence mass condensates. These are regions where the fundamental coherence field has become phase-locked into very low-energy, non-radiating modes.
Phase-locked, like stable, coherent patterns in the field itself.
Exactly. They contribute gravitationally, bending light and affecting galaxy rotation just like dark matter needs to. But crucially, they don't interact strongly with light or ordinary matter, which is why they're dark.
So they mimic dark matter gravitationally, but they're not particles.
Yeah.
What are they made of then?
The primary candidate UCTE proposes is related to neutrinos. It suggests large-scale, long-lived, coherent superpositions of neutrino sector fields, stabilized by hypergravity. Think of vast, stable clouds of coherent neutrino energy.
Neutrino clouds acting as dark matter. How would they form?
They're theorized to form during the early coherence phase cascade, particularly during stages associated with electroweak symmetry reduction SU2 to U1. At these points, neutrino mass eigenvalues could lock into these stable, large-scale condensate forms. So they behave gravitationally like CDM, but dynamically they're more like a fluid with inherent phase structure.
How does the math handle this, the conceptual framework?
Well, the basic equation for gravity, the Poisson equation, gets modified. You still have the term for ordinary matter density, but you add another term for the density of these coherence condensates, Rho. This density depends on the collective state of the neutrino fields and, importantly, their coherence length, how far the phase locking extends. For this to work, the coherence length needs to be huge, and the lifetime of these condensates needs to be longer than the age of the universe.
And how could we distinguish this from WIMPs or axions observationally? What are the unique signatures?
Several potential differences. In structure formation, because these condensates have a finite coherence length, UCTE predicts slightly less clustering on very small scales compared to CDM. You might even see interference-like patterns in the cosmic web.
Less small-scale clumping.
Yeah.
Okay, what else?
For galaxy rotation curves, instead of perfectly smooth curves, you might detect very subtle oscillations or wiggles corresponding to the boundaries or fringes of these coherence condensates within the galaxy halo. Gravitational lensing might reveal smoother, more large-scale coherence envelopes rather than the granular clumpy halos expected from particle dark matter.
Smoother halos. Interesting. Is there a smoking gun test?
Perhaps the detection of phase correlations between the relic neutrinos left over from the early universe. This might show up as specific anisotropies in the cosmic neutrino background if we can ever measure it precisely enough. Other potential markers include unique patterns in 21-centimeter cosmology signals, subtle differences in strong lensing time delays, and specific features in the CMB lensing spectrum. It offers concrete ways to test this idea against standard CDM.
Okay, those are some major replacements, really shaking things up. But UCTE also performs upgrades, right? Taking existing concepts and giving them a deeper coherence-based meaning. Let's talk about special relativity. How is that upgraded?
Right, special relativity, SR. UCTE views it not as fundamental, but as a limit condition of coherence gradients. Einstein's postulates about the constancy of physical laws and the speed of light are seen as emerging under specific conditions.
Conditions related to coherence.
Exactly. UCTE says hypergravity provides the truly invariant background frame. Lorentz symmetry, the math behind SR, is then seen as just the projection of coherence phase invariance when curvature gradients are zero, basically, in flat spacetime regions with stable coherence.
And things like time dilation and length contraction. What causes them in UCTE if not spacetime warping?
UCTE interprets them as a loss of mutual coherence between reference frames. As relative velocity increases, which corresponds to an increasing coherence gradient velocity, the ability of two systems, like two clocks, to maintain a synchronized phase relationship decreases. The Lorentz factor gamma is re-expressed in terms of this coherence gradient. Time dilation at eco arises from reduced phase accumulation due to this desynchronization.
So it's about clocks falling out of sync at a fundamental coherence level, not time itself stretching.
That's the essence of it. And this leads to testable implications. UCTE predicts tiny departures from perfect Lorentz symmetry at extreme coherence gradients.
Where will we see those?
Maybe in ultra-high energy cosmic rays, ultra-precise pulsar timing, or with our best atomic clocks. These deviations would be incredibly small, scaling with higher powers of the coherence gradient velocity, but potentially detectable. You might even see tiny polarization-dependent variations in the speed of light or neutrinos in extreme environments, which SR forbids.
Wow. Okay, what about entropy? Boltzmann's entropy, S cos KL Anna, usually seen as a measure of disorder. How does UCTE upgrade that?
It upgrades it to entropy as coherence residue. Instead of disorder, entropy is the residual organizational structure left after coherence is reduced or exported. Remember the conservation of coherence principle. Total coherency COT is conserved in closed systems.
Right.
So when entropy appears to increase in an open system, it's because usable coherence has been lost to the environment. It becomes this incoherent residue. The Activals and Boltzmann's formula then counts accessible coherence microconfigurations, not just any microstate.
So it's quantifying the coherence that's become inaccessible or spread out, rather than just randomness.
Exactly. It's a more structured view of what's being lost. The formalism involves coherence-weighted probabilities, testable implications. Controlled decoherence experiments should only show entropy increase when coherence demonstrably leaves the measured system. It also suggests the Landauer limit on the energy cost of erasing information might be avoidable if erasure preserves phase-locked coherence. And it provides a framework for understanding how living systems maintain low entropy by actively restoring coherence.
Fascinating. Life is coherence management. What about Noether's theorem, the link between symmetries and conserved quantities?
UCTE generalizes it significantly. It introduces coherence current conservation and, very importantly, the Noetherian asymmetry theorem.
Okay, what do those mean?
First, every symmetry of the coherence manifold leads to a conserved coherence current, similar to the standard theorem. But the asymmetry theorem is new. For every asymmetry resonance that reduces coherence, like an observation, there's a corresponding conserved asymmetry current that persists across that reduction.
So even when coherence is reduced, something related to the asymmetry, the choice made, is still conserved.
Exactly. It's a dual conservation. You have conserved coherence currents in closed systems, but these asymmetry currents are conserved universally, even during reductions. This unites conservation laws in a deeper way. Implications include invariant patterns in high-energy scattering, persistent asymmetry currents in decoherence tests, and maybe even explaining stability in biological networks through these conserved asymmetry signatures.
Amazing. How does it upgrade Maxwell's equations for electromagnetism?
UCTE sees EM as the U1 projection of the coherence tensor. Classical electromagnetism isn't fundamental on its own. It's the U1 part, one specific slice of a much larger universal coherence tensor field that lives on a complex structure called a coherence symmetry group bundle.
So light, electricity, magnetism. They're just one aspect of this bigger coherence picture.
Precisely. And constants, like the speed of light c or vacuum impedance z0, emerge from the properties of this vacuum coherence tensor. What's more, the vacuum's response isn't constant. It can depend on direction and scale within this deeper coherence space, the FCHP, leading to effects like vacuum dispersion.
The vacuum itself having structure and potentially affecting light differently.
Yes. Predictions include tiny vacuum birefringence or anisotropy in extreme coherence gradients, maybe frequency or direction-dependent light speed variations near compact objects. It could also explain charge quantization from the U1 structure and even suggest nuclear EM coherence crosstalk affecting isotope lifetimes.
Okay, moving to fluids. Kolmogorov turbulence, the -53 power law for energy cascade. How's that upgraded?
It becomes a multi-scale coherence cascade. Turbulence isn't just energy cascading down, it's coherence being transferred from large scales to small scales until it finally decoheres, dissipates. This applies beyond fluids to plasmas, superfluids, quantum fields.
So it's the transfer of ordered phase relationships, even in chaos.
Exactly. The classical -53 power law emerges when the coherence space, FCHP, is isotropic. But UCTE predicts the exponent can deviate slightly, -53 plus zero, depending on directionality and the underlying scale hierarchy from the FCHP geometry.
Testable deviations again.
Yes. Look for directional variations of the spectral slope in astrophysical jets or the solar wind, maybe stepwise changes in the spectrum in quantum turbulence experiments. It could also mean magnetic fields and plasmas preserve coherence longer than classical theory predicts.
And finally, decoherence theory, explaining the quantum to classical transition.
UCTE frames it as coherence basis selection. It's not passive decay, it's an active process governed by that universal observer function, the asymmetry resonance operator. The environment interaction triggers are to select a basis, a classical outcome, that maximizes the stability of underlying asymmetry currents.
An active selection process, and you said it doesn't destroy all coherence.
Crucially, no. Some coherence is preserved in hidden or orthogonal modes. This opens up possibilities like quantum revival without complex time reversal, real-time shifts in the preferred classical basis if the environment changes subtly, and maybe even observable interference in macroscopic systems under controlled conditions if that hidden coherence can be tapped. It might also explain the efficiency of processes like photosynthesis if biological systems actively select coherence-preserving pathways.
This whole framework seems incredibly interconnected, and that hypergravity identity pillar we started with.
Okay.
It sounds like it's more than just a background. It feels central to everything UCT proposes.
It absolutely is, and that leads to a deeper insight within UCTE itself. Hypergravity identity isn't just passive invariance, it's the active generative operator driving reality's emergence. It's the coherence engine's meta-prime mover.
The engine itself, not just setting the rules, but actively playing the game.
You could say that. It continuously projects the infinite potential of the onelectic coherence field into structured forms. This active projection orchestrates everything. The emergence of gauge symmetries, U1, SU2, SU3, arises naturally from its Kiered reductions. It drives dimensional actualization, where layers of dimensions crystallize out as coherence reduces, each tied to a gauge tier. And the coherence gradient flows that manifest as mass, curvature, and forces are all conducted by this hypergravity identity.
So it's in constant dialogue with the meta-operator, the observation process.
Exactly. There's a feedback loop. Observation via the meta-operator modulates coherence flows, and the hypergravity identity reprojects reality based on the resulting asymmetry structures. Even things like vacuum fluctuations get reinterpreted.
How so?
UCTE sees them as vacuum coherence modulation. Not random noise, but the signature of the hypergravity identity, actively redistributing potential across dimensions, maintaining the balance of reality.
Turning noise into purposeful action. That's elegant.
It leads to this philosophical elegance, the hypergravity identity as the invariance for all variance, the unchanging source of all change, the fixed reference that enables and organizes all variation and emergence. It unifies the passive framework and active dynamics.
Okay, if hypergravity is the active engine, how does UCTE pull together the mass spectrum, dimensional emergence, and the coherence spectrum? This sounds like the ultimate synthesis.
It really aims to be. The core idea for mass spectrum unification is that mass isn't intrinsic. It emerges from a mode's coupling to the hypergravity background and its sector eigenvalues after coherence reduction.
So mass depends on both the universal background connection and the particle's specific coherence signature.
Precisely. Conceptually, the mass ma involves a scale factor, the specific coherence eigenvalue E from its coherence symmetry group orbit, an environment-dependent hypergravity coupling EHG, and interaction dressing ZA.
This seems to explain mass ratios quite naturally then.
Yes, the key ratio rule suggests mass ratios within a particle family, MJ-MI, are dominated by the eigenvalue ratios, if the other factors are similar. And particle mixing, like CKM, PMNS matrices, arises from basis misalignment set by the asymmetry resonance operator. Similar eigenvalues predict large mixing. Hierarchical eigenvalues predict small mixing.
And the specific predictions from this unified mass picture.
Again, those tiny environment-dependent mass shifts in specific conditions like Casimir cavities or strong fields, a unified neutrino mass origin, naturally explaining their small masses via eigenvalues and small AHG projections, removing the need for a seesaw mechanism, and confirmation that the 125G Higgs is a resonance, with mass causation rooted in AAHG, not a VEV.
Okay, that connects mass to coherence and hypergravity. What about dimensions? The dimensional emergence thresholds, DET idea.
This is maybe even more radical. Dimensions aren't fixed. They crystallize when coherence passes specific eigenthresholds during reduction from the initial hyperfractal state to effective spacetime. Each threshold crossing adds or freezes dimensions.
So the universe grew its dimensions in steps.
That's the picture. The threshold law is basically, if coherent structure F crosses threshold luck, Dimensions change, DU plus look EK. During the early coherence phase cascade, ECPC, the universe crossed several look values, maybe going 1DU, 2D, or 3 plus 1D, locking in dimensions, conservation laws, and setting the stage for mass eigenvalues.
Could we ever see evidence of this dimensional unfolding?
UCTE predicts step features in spectra small, distinct jumps in the CMB, primordial gravitational waves, or large-scale structure spectra, different from smooth inflationary running. Also, high-energy dimensional running, where effective dimensions might slightly deviate from 3 at extreme scales, causing tiny dispersion anomalies. Potentially anisotropic effects like birefringence if the underlying hyperfractal layer isn't uniform. Maybe even lab analogs and metamaterials showing step changes in transport properties.
So it really connects everything. Can you sketch out that cosmic gold map showing how mass and dimensions interlock through these coherence thresholds?
Okay, let's try. Imagine a scale of coherence amplitude Cia from 1 down. At the top, maximal invariance, Cia 1.0, pure hypergravity identity. Unobservable baseline. Just below, coherence gradients emerge, Ca yields 0.98. First differentiation. Markers. Vacuum polarization anisotropy, CME polarization flow patterns. Then, gauge symmetry emergence starts. U1 projection, Ca is 0.98 low. Electromagnetism appears. Markers. Fine structure constant stability, vacuum birefringence tests, SU2 tier, Ca is 0.85. Electroweak layer forms, markers, WZ mass ratios, parity violation effects, SU3 tier, Ca is 0.80. Strong force color domain activates, markers, QCD confinement radius, jet fragmentation.
So the forces peel off as coherence drops. Then
Yes. Mass spectrum formation, lepton band, Ca Elios of 0.72, lepton mass is electron U unlocalized. Markers, genus 2 anomalies, lepton universality test, quark band and confinement, Ca x 0.66. Quark mass is hadron formation, markers, hadronization thresholds, QGP cooling, neutrino condensation, Ca 0.66. Coherence mass condensates form, dark matter candidate, markers, neutrino mass differences, C spectrum features.
Wow, the masses appear in bands tied to specific coherence levels, and then structure.
Finally, curvature and structure. Geometry structuring, Ca is 0.52. Large-scale structure, space-time curvature emerges. Markers, galaxy correlation function, BAO scale shifts. Turbulent regime, Ca 0.50. Koinai turbulent signatures set in. Markers, IgM turbulent spectra, GW background fluctuations.
That map is incredible. It shows why mass bands might align with DET stages, why hierarchies repeat, same ladder, different projections, why neutrinos are special, eigenvalues near a DET boundary, and links it all back to early universe geometry controlling later structure. It's a unified story.
It is, and UCTE doesn't stop there. It takes this coherence lens and applies it beyond physics into what it calls the trilogy of deconstruction: physics, mathematics, and philosophy.
Deconstructing. It sounds like taking things apart to rebuild them on coherence foundations. Let's start with stage 1. Physics beyond current foundations. How are core physics concepts redefined?
Okay, quick run through. Space-time. Not a container, but emergent coherent structure. Mass. Not intrinsic, but coherence localization below eigenvalues. Inertia. Resistance to coherence reconfiguration relative to hypergravity. Energy conservation. Coherence accounting via another symmetry. Entropy. Non-recoverable coherence residue.
Keep going.
Electromagnetism. U1. Projection of coherence gradient forces. Distinct coherence gradient modes. Gravity, hypergravity gradient constraint coherence redistribution. Relativity. Limit case of coherence dynamics, high coherence, low variance, quantum measurement, coherence observer, coupling, eigenmode stabilization, vacuum, high coherence generative ground state, CMB, residual coherence pattern from phase transition, particle families, threshold eigenvalue bands, causality, coherence path ordering, asymmetry, constants, stable ratios of coherence parameters. Each redefined concept has observational ties, mathematical reformulations, and philosophical weight.
That basically rewrites first-year physics based on coherence. So what does this do to stage 2? Mathematics assumed versus generative foundations. Is math also emergent?
UCTE argues yes. Traditional math often starts with axioms. UCTE asks if they are generative. Sets. Not axiomatic, but emergent coherence clusters, stable patterns, numbers. Not primitive, but emergent measures of coherence partitioning, eigenvalues. Morphisms, in category theory, not abstract maps, but arise from coherence transformations, from generative flows.
So math describes the patterns of coherence generation.
Exactly. Topology, not fixed, but the state of coherence connectivity. Geometry. Emergent metric from the coherence field. Logic. Coherence stable inference patterns. Probability. Projection of coherence variance. Algebra. From symmetry of coherence flows. The continuum. High coherence limit, not truly infinite. Homotopi, coherence equivalence classes under coherence-preserving maps. Math becomes the language of coherence dynamics.
Grounding math and physics in a way. Okay, that leads to stage 3. Philosophy reconstructing the frame. How are fundamental philosophical ideas reshaped?
Philosophy's foundations are also seen through a generative lens. First principles, not chosen axioms, but ontologically generative principles, like hypergravity identity, irreducibility, not model limits, but generative closure, fundamental coherence structures, identity, not primitive, but a stable coherence attractor, persistence, existence, not a given state, but persistence of generativity itself.
So philosophical concepts get tied to the actual process of reality generation.
Precisely. Causality, not just time sequence, but asymmetry and coherence exchange. Truth, not just correspondence, but coherent stability under transformation. Knowledge, not just justified belief, but generative alignment, resonating with reality structures. Ontology, not just classification, but a generative taxonomy mapping these regimes. Meaning, not linguistic, but generative relationality, functional role. Necessity, not logical constraint alone, but emerges from coherent stability. Philosophy becomes grounded in the dynamics of coherence.
This trilogy is vast. Physics, math, philosophy, all rebuilt on coherence. But you mentioned it doesn't stop there. There's a stage 4.
Yes, the emerging frontiers, where UCTE pushes into domains where coherence principles might reveal previously unrecognized Eureka moments.
Like where? What are these new frontiers?
In the physics frontier, biophysics as coherence expression, viewing life as an inevitable outcome of coherence organizing itself. Biology as a physics of sustained resonance. Complex systems and criticality, self-organization seen as coherence crossing amplitude thresholds, nonlinear resonance cascades, driving structure across all scales, and information as a physical invariant, gaining ontological status as coherence-preserving transformation.
So biology, complexity, information. They become part of physics through coherence. What about the mathematics frontier?
Here, combinatorics, counting arrangements, becomes a generative pattern space, cataloging coherence-preserving structures. Fractals and scaling laws are seen not just as patterns, but as rooted in coherence dynamics and ontological necessity. Operator algebras reflect fundamental constraints on allowed coherence transformations, and non-standard analysis, infinitesimals infinities, describes boundary behaviors of coherence, amplitude, and variance.
Bringing more abstract math into the generative fold? And the philosophy frontier.
It extends to things like ethics of generativity, grounding moral value in enhancing coherence, making ethics ontological, epistemology of emergence, where knowing is alignment with generative pathways, a structural resonance, metaphysics of invariance, where invariance provides the grammar of reality generation, and even aesthetics as coherence resonance, suggesting beauty is the recognition of optimal coherence and ontological insight.
Ethics, beauty, grounded in physics via coherence. That's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
This whole structure, it feels less like separate stages and more like a cycle, maybe a spiral.
Exactly. It's described as a spiral integration. The deconstruction isn't flat. Physics leads to mathematics, which informs philosophy, which then points to these emerging frontiers. But insights from these frontiers loop back, enriching our understanding of philosophy, math, and even fundamental physics again.
So physics gives observations. Math finds the generative laws. Philosophy interprets the ontological meaning, which opens up new frontiers like biology, which then feeds back new physical insights. A self-reinforcing loop.
Precisely. It's envisioned as a self-renewing epistemic engine. It's a map not just of what we know, but how knowledge itself evolves, constantly revealing new interconnections and potential eureka moments as we trace the patterns of underlying unified coherence.
It suggests the deepest truths aren't isolated islands, but parts of one vast, coherent continent we're only beginning to map.
A beautiful way to put it.
So we have to leave you, the listener, with this final thought. If all of reality, from quarks to consciousness, is an expression of these hidden, interacting coherence patterns constantly unfolding, what hidden coherence patterns might you start to notice, to observe in your own corner of reality?
Something to think about.
Thank you for joining us on this incredibly deep dive.